And welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. I'm one of your hosts, Frank Horvath, and joined with me in studio is our other host, Mr. Tim Kelly. Tim, how are you doing on this fantastic morning?
I'm good. Can't believe it's February already.
I know. Time absolutely flies when you're having fun. We've been doing a ton of work. Been doing a ton of stuff up at the range, a lot of different classes, a lot of neat things that are been going on. You got folded up last weekend into some pretzels and got some kicks and things like that, I heard. So how was that class?
That class was great, man, with Cecil. Man, it was awesome. We don't get to do a whole lot of, rolling around the mat stuff at our range. And most of the time it's shooty, pew, pew stuff. Mm-hmm. And this was a great opportunity to roll out the mats. And we ended up having a packed class, man. There was 16, 17 of us there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people in there. And you know what? No one got hurt.
Great.
I'm a little sore,
right?
But other than that, nobody got hurt, man. It was very well orchestrated. I know I've recommended him in the past, but if you can ever make it to a class with Cecil Birch from Immediate Action Combatives, you need to do that. It was exceptional. It really was.
That's great. That's good to hear. Yeah, I know, talking about classes or really talking about anything where you get physical, the first question is, but I don't want to get hurt. Like, I got to go to work on Monday. But with an experienced trainer, with somebody who knows what they're doing and knows how to pair people up specifically, it makes that whole process just seamless, right?
Yeah.
That's really what you want to look for. So talking along that, our topic for the day is, what can I do if I can't make it to the range? There's a lot of different. We hear a lot of this, especially around winter, right? When let's be honest, it's just cold and wet, and people just don't want to get out in the cold and wet, which is completely understandable. If you're uncomfortable, you're not learning, you're not really going to do much growth. There's some benefit, to getting out and in the weather. But what can I do if I can't make it to the range, Tim?
Man, there's a lot of options and opportunities, and I think where a lot of people get stuck, especially around this time of year, especially when it's cold and wet and rainy outside. Nobody wants to get outside. Nobody wants to go anywhere. A lot of times we get stuck on the couch scrolling down, through reels and
scrolling,
yeah, man. And it wastes a ton of time. You could be using that time to do something better. Right. Even if you can't make it to the range, well, that's not the end all be all. Like, read a book. Yep. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that you could be doing to educate yourself on and around the subject of being a responsibly armed citizen. Yep. You just took a book from the library at Apache. Yeah. What were you reading again?
It's fancy revolvers.
Fancy revolvers.
Yeah, that's it. Fancy revolvers and pistols.
Ed McGivern.
That's it.
McGivern. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you learned a whole bunch from that.
Well, yeah, I absolutely did. And what the crazy part about that was, as I'm reading through this, we hear the old trope of, this is the latest, greatest, newfangled thing. This is the newest school of thought. And you go back and you read a book like that and you go, wait, this dude's talking about the same stuff we're talking about 60 years ago or whatever. I mean, it's absolutely wild. And the phrasing, the way that he goes through, the way that he goes through and explains things, again, in the vernacular of the time and just kind of that older speak, it is identical to the things that we're talking about today. Different platform, a little different, different way of going about doing things, but absolutely relatable, like 100% relatable to us today as responsible armed citizens, and it's just fascinating. Yeah. Like, it's really interesting. But you're absolutely right. There are so many other things. There's things that we can do that don't always involve going pew, right? That don't always involve handgun. You can brush up on the law. You can brush up on just general self-awareness. You can brush up on just being a responsible person, a responsible citizen, period. Not necessarily the armed citizen. I mean, a lot of that starts with just little things and little baby steps. We're still early in the year, so a lot of people are still talking about their New Year's resolutions. Some people's New Year resolutions have already been broke, right? Others are still trucking along. Yeah. But really going along with that, it's those little things that you can do that make the biggest impact, or
Right.
the little consistent things that you can do that make the biggest impact.
Yeah, that's something Cecil was talking about this weekend. It's like you don't have to do it all at once. You don't
Right.
have to, just absorb everything all at once and just be this all of a sudden well-rounded individual in the subject of responsibly armed citizen. You can just do one little thing at a time every day. If you, I think the phrase that he uses, if you stack a piece of paper on your desk every day, it's not going to look much, in a couple of days.
Right.
It's not going to look like much in a couple of months, but in a couple of years, you're going to have an entire ream of paper stacked up on your desk. So read an article. subscribe to some Patreon channels from like Tom Givens of Rangemaster or Greg
Apache
Ellifritz
Solutions.
or Apache Solutions. There's all kinds of different, ways you can educate yourself aside from just, scrolling down.
Doom scrolling.
Yeah, doom scrolling.
Right.
Like it doesn't get you anywhere. There's a ton of great YouTube videos. There's a ton of bad YouTube videos, but there's a lot of really good YouTube videos that can kind of give you some ideas and maybe spark some desire to get to the range or do something to make up for it.
Yeah, no, 100%. We've talked around all the obvious things, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about reading, and we talked about different things that you can do at home. Start small and go from there. One of the premier things that comes to mind when it comes to what if I can't go to the range, dry fire.
Yep.
Dry fire. I really think that we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing that, because here's the thing. A lot of people just skirt dry fire off to the side. They go,
Right.
I don't need to do that. That's dumb. If my gun's not actually going bang, then I'm wasting my time. Or they're concerned that they're damaging their firearm.
Oh yeah.
In the process of dry fire, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's so much benefit from chunking together those skills in a controlled, safe environment, controlled, safe way that far outweigh what you do on the actual range during live fire.
Right.
There's just so much that you can do, so much that you can learn, to a point. Like everything, anything in excess can cause some issues, but for the most part, dry fire really is what helps seal those foundational skills in, and makes it so that you can perform the absolute best when you are on the range, right? Or
Right.
when you need to use your firearm.
There's a lot of awesome dry fire tools that you can use. Like you look into the Mantis or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know really where to get started, that's a cool piece of gear that you can add to your gun and dry fire with it. And it comes with an app, so it kind of guides you along with, hey, this is where you should start and this is where you should end up.
Yep.
They even issue out patches for achievement and stuff
Yep.
like that. There's all kinds of different ways to do that. What I'm finding is folks who are adamant about dry fire can't often make it to the range.
Right.
Right. And the folks that can make it to the range all the time, they don't dry fire.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Man, dry fire is so much cheaper.
No, 100%.
It's so much cheaper. It could really save you on a lot of money, and you can get a lot done just doing that.
Speaking from experience, one of the biggest things that I've run into is, here lately, I have not been able to make it to the range consistently, right?
Right.
So I've been doing a ton of dry fire, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit, and probably in the next segment. But there's a lot of really good things that happen, in dry fire. And there's a couple drawbacks, and I think we need to dive into that. But for the most part, I've been getting a ton of dry fire in. And it has shown its fruit for sure. So let's go to break, and we'll come right back.
Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. My name is Tim Kelly, and with me I have Frank Horvath, and we are discussing everything revolving the Responsibly Armed Citizen. And right now we're talking about what you can do if you can't make it to the range to practice. So when we left off, we were talking a little bit about dry fire. And I don't know, man, what are some of the specific dry fire routines that you would prescribe to the responsibly armed citizen?
Well, the first thing that I would do, like the very first thing, it doesn't matter if you're new to shooting or if you've been around the block a little bit, we'll say, is get familiar with your firearm, right? Administratively. So understand, intimately, how to check and make sure that it's clear. Go through that process and verifying that and establish that process firmly. A lot of the issues that we hear, the incidences that we hear about, really revolve around neglect, right? Is they'll go, oh, I know how to handle my firearm. I know that this gun is clear, and then they have an incident, right? Or the gun goes off when they weren't expecting it, and it's completely preventable, but they did not set up proper procedures, so that that incident would not happen.
Right.
So I think administrative handling is I feel that it is a method of dry fire.
Yeah.
It is safety. Safety is a skill set. We've talked about that before, and that is the first step in establishing a dry fire routine. And that is the first step that you should do. So get your hand on your firearm, understand exactly how it functions, understand exactly when it's unloaded, how to properly unload it. Seek guidance if you don't know. If it's one of those things where you have a gun in your box and you know nothing about it, go find a trainer.
Right.
Reach out to somebody. Reach out to us. Reach out to Apache Solutions. Reach out to any number of other reputable trainers that are out in the industry. But establishing that first touch point of, okay, get my hand on the gun. Let me get more comfortable with this gun. Let me really intimately understand this firearm. Is I think is the first step for any firearm, for any firearm owner. Whether you're experienced or not. There are nuances between different types of firearms and different platforms that you need to intimately understand prior to shooting it live.
Right.
You really do. Yeah, Tim, you're in the process now of playing with a new gun, right?
Right.
So, describe to me a little bit of that process, because I think up until a couple weeks ago, I don't even think you had shot it yet. I think
Right.
you were letting everybody else shoot it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So SDS Imports, more specifically the Military Armament Corp, sent myself and Zach a Mac 9 DS, which is a double stack 1911, and real fancy gun. Shoots great. I finally figured that out because I finally got to shoot it. But what I ended up doing was just dumping it off with the rest of the cadre and saying, here's 1,000 rounds,
Make it go away.
video every single one of them and let me know, what issues you have with it. And so I'm writing up a report for them. But while they were doing that, I was taking the gun in the evenings and doing some dry fire, and I've been documenting specifically the transition from carrying a striker-fired handgun to carrying a single action semi-auto, and all the differences and everything that comes with that. And it's really no different than as far as dry firing. There's really no real difference as far as how I treat that gun versus how I treat my other guns. Right. I would say that especially if you're just getting started and you've never taken a class or anything like that, highly recommend getting some training first. Get into a class first or something. Look into some redundancies like a barrel block. You can go on Amazon and buy a 3-pack of 9mm, 45 ACP, 40, whatever barrel blocks that will, if you install it correctly, then there's absolutely no way that the gun can go bang.
Right.
And that's a great, and by no means do I consider something like that. By no means do I consider something like that training wheels or something like that. I mean, I use them. Yeah. We use them all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Put those redundancies in place so you don't have to concern yourself with putting a hole someplace that doesn't need to be.
Right.
The specifically the double stack 9mm. One of the things that I've been really focusing on is the basics. Really, can I press the trigger without disrupting my sights? And with a single action semi-automatic, it's much easier to do that. It's almost like cheating,
right?
Versus a striker-fired handgun, because the trigger is only releasing the hammer.
Right.
Whereas with most traditional striker-fired handguns, the trigger is both cocking and releasing the striker. Right. So it's performing multiple tasks inside the gun. Therefore, there's room for hang-ups and stuff like that in the trigger.
But
Go Go ahead.
I want to get to, but the differences, right? The devil's in the details. So now you're moving from, a safe action trigger to a manual safety, right?
Yeah.
So now, you're adding something to your draw stroke. You're adding something to, at presentation, I should say.
Sure.
That, okay, now there's an extra movement, or even in the draw stroke itself. I think you and I were discussing it on the range, a couple weeks ago, that, in the process of drawing, you're having to move where your thumb would naturally set with a striker fire handgun, and all that's different. And it's dangerous to do that live. It's
Yes.
dangerous to do that when, in a live fire situation. Dry fire is the absolute best place to start working through those little kinks, or
Right.
those differences, we'll say. Not necessarily kinks, but it's a little nuance. It's a little bit of movement. It's little things that are different that potentially can compound and create a great big old problem.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really what I think we need to get at is take whatever the gun that you're planning on carrying and focus on that, and then and then work on the things.
Right.
So specifically, it's really important to work on, again, understanding administratively how to handle that fire.
Safety skills. You said a
Right.
while ago. Safety. The way you treat your firearm safely is a skill set.
Right.
It is something that can be diminished as you start to develop other skills along the way.
100%.
And that's where a lot of people miss the mark with dry fire, because they can build a ton of bad habits, putting their hand in front of the muzzle, doing all kinds of just weird stuff with their gun in dry fire that they can get away with in dry fire because they're not going to harm themselves if they're doing it correctly, right? And then they take those bad habits to the range. I was just working with somebody in a class not too long ago, and a very experienced shooter. Guy's been doing this for a long, long time. And while we were working together, I was asking him some questions, and he had his gun out of his holster, and it was dry. We were dry firing on the range. It was dry, but he's waving his hand around, and his hand starts going in front of the muzzle. And so I just kind of reached over and pointed his muzzle down, and he's like, "I didn't realize I was doing that."
Yep.
Yeah, man, because you don't practice safety as a skill set.
Right.
And that's something that has to be done. Like if you don't let those safety skills evolve and mesh with the rest of the skills that you're developing, you're just waiting for the opportunity to put a hole in yourself for someone else. Right. So that's extremely important, is those safety skills.
So outside those safety skills, we'll say we've established at least a foundation of those safety skills. Now, moving on from there, I think the next important fundamental skill is going to be, like I said, that presentation, right? Really making sure that you have a proper grip, a safe grip. Making sure that you can, just as you had said before, press trigger and don't disrupt sights. Those are the beginnings of those foundational skills that you need in order to grow and to start to chase after those times and those splits, those wonder numbers, we'll call them, that you see the guys on YouTube do, or whatever, right? The guys on the internet do. The importance of doing all that, right? The importance of doing all that, in dry fire is not just, doesn't just revolve around the firearm. It revolves around you, right? It revolves around, your ability, your cognitive ability, your physical ability, and then also test out your gear, right? You're testing out, specific holster placements. You're testing out belts. You're testing out clothing, right? One of the earlier sessions that we had done that still very vividly sticks in my mind is we had a young lady that had come to the class, had a very specific way that she wanted to train in her everyday gear, which happened to be a dress, right? And so the way that she wanted to go about drawing from a particular holster was, at first anyway, was a little garter rig.
Yeah.
That was very interesting. That was interesting to navigate around. In idealized, like in your head, okay, sure, that might work. Company sells it. That must mean it must work fantastic.
Right.
But in actual application, like in practical use, there's some significant hurdles there that you're going to have to consider. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying there are better options out there.
There really are.
There's significantly better options out there. So and the place to discover that is not in live fire. The
Right.
place to discover that, the place to work through all those little kinks and those little things is 100% in dry fire.
Right.
We have a pistol class. It's Apache Pistol 101, and we spend a significant amount of that, part of that class in dry fire. So much so that by the time that you do those first shots, by the time, the very first time you press that trigger, with a live firearm in a safe environment on the range, you're hitting aces. I mean, you're just an absolute awesome shot because you've practiced. You've been practicing all day. You know what it feels like. You know what you're looking for.
You've been practicing correctly.
Correctly, right?
That's another big thing is the first thing I thought of when I'm reading what can I do if I can't make it to the range was that person that just goes to the gun range and punches a bunch of holes in pieces of paper and walks away feeling like they've accomplished something.
Right.
And realistically, there's not a whole lot that's been accomplished other than, well, you've got some familiarization, but you may have been building some bad habits.
100%.
One of the you said you do dry fire in the basic pistol class. And that's great. We do that in pretty much all of our classes. There's some element of dry fire in there. I taught a 2-hour private session. It's probably the only 2-hour block of instruction I'll have all year because these guys won't let me have any. But I taught a 2-hour private instruction a couple weeks ago, and the gentleman was surprised at the end of the 2-hour session. He's like, God, there was so much that I'm able to take away from this. I think we dumped like 75 to 100 rounds.
Right.
Throughout the entire thing. We may have gone through 100 rounds.
Yep.
And he was extremely surprised. Like, man, if I spent 2 hours at a gun range, man, I don't know how many rounds I would have went through.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about what your specific dry fire routines look like, Frank, and what mine are when we get back from this next break.
Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We are in a deep discussion about dry fire, all different aspects of it, right? We talked about, the safety being paramount, right? Safety being that fundamental establishing skill and working from there. Talked about, a number of different things, number of different use cases. So let's talk specifically about, those dry fire routines, right? So we touched on Tim working with this new handgun and kind of what revolves around that. In your normal dry fire routine, Tim, what does that look like for you as an individual?
Okay, so I don't consider myself a professional at dry fire. I also don't consider myself a professional at lifting weights, right? But I had some previous experience of lifting weights and going to the gym before. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I did, whether these people are judging me online or not, they're definitely judging me.
I'm judging you.
But one of the things that I did when I went to the gym was I isolated certain muscle groups, right? Before I wouldn't just go in there and work my entire body every single day at the gym. I would, work my biceps and triceps, one day, and the next day I do legs. And then the next day I'm going to do chest and back or something along those lines, right? And most of the time I mixed it up, but I was never really just going in there and doing full body workouts or anything. Mainly because I tried that and I ended up getting hurt. So hurt myself because I don't know what I'm doing. In terms of dry fire, I kind of do the same thing. So I might do, let's say on Mondays, I might be doing just simple like breathing and focusing on good trigger presses, good clean trigger presses, and working on pressing dead triggers and stuff like that. So for those that you don't know what a dead trigger is, that means after you've pressed the trigger in dry fire, typically what you find in most striker fired guns is that the trigger doesn't do anything else. It won't return back or reset or anything like that, so you can get another click. So it's just like you're pressing up against the wall. And one of the benefits of that is it shows you any excessive movement in your sights. Right. So I might be working on something like that on Mondays, and then on Tuesdays I might incorporate pistol presentation. So just starting from a ready position, and then extending out on target, extending my sights out on target, and then pressing triggers again. So I'm now putting stuff together. And then later on throughout the week, I'll start incorporating draw stroke and, that type of thing. Maybe some movement, maybe some like short lateral movement or something like that. Maybe start getting into manipulations like reloads and dealing with stoppages and that sort of thing. And I would say for the most part, I don't really introduce a timer into dry fire until the last little bit of it if I'm going to introduce a timer.
Yep.
So, I guess that's kind of how I lay out my dry fire routines throughout the week. That's typically what I do.
So it's kind of, I don't want to say it's uncanny, but we have very similar dry fire routines.
Imagine that.
So no, imagine that. So for me, I have a kind of an active home. I have lots of little kids, things like that. So the time where I can do any dry fire at all is either super early in the morning or super late at night. So the timer buzzer thing, my timer buzzer game. It depends. So I have these fancy, it's a Competition Pocket Pro 2 that I've modified. I removed the buzzer out of it, and I have headphones, right? Yeah. So I can stick a headphone jack in it where the buzzer is supposed to be. So I can wear that thing to get a timer, to get a buzzer, right? And kind of go through and play with that. But, let me back up regardless. Isolation of those specific skill sets, right? So, there may be a session for me where I'm only working on presentation, and it may not even be a full presentation. It could only be a presentation, we'll say from my mid-draw stroke, we'll call it. And I can spend, an entire dry fire session only focusing on, acquiring my sight picture, right? My sight alignment, making sure that's absolutely, solid. There's another exercise that I really enjoy doing, and, people out here are going to absolutely they're going to misunderstand, misquote, and they're not going to hear what I'm saying. But I work on my natural point of aim.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So that is, I don't want to confuse the world, but it's
when he uses energy to direct his gun to his target.
Yeah, the wanted thing. It's where I curve projectiles.
Yes.
Anyway,
it's more advanced.
It's more advanced. Yeah. No. I'm joking. But it's where I can go through my entire presentation, right, all the way out to my side alignment, side picture piece, with my eyes closed, right, and then open my eyes and see exactly where that dot is, see exactly where my sights are, and I can make those little micro adjustments if I need to make sure that I am absolutely spot on. Tom Givens, he has this quote. It says, "The felt aspects of handgun manipulation."
Yeah,
is it not Tom
Spalding.
Givens? Spalding. That is Spalding.
The felt aspects of shooting are grossly underrated.
An old guy somewhere out
yes.
there. So, absolutely. The felt aspects of shooting is grossly underrated. So, really going through and feeling that out, right? Yeah. Feeling the gun out, feeling out you as an individual, feeling out, okay, this feels right, this doesn't. I'm consistently doing this weird thing when I am on the range, right? I'm consistently shooting low left. One dry fire, I can go, it's because I'm excessively gripping my gun. When I'm in this my dry fire routine, and I'm pressing that dead trigger rule, say, and my sights are darting off low left, we call that a clue, right? There's something there. But anyway, so getting back to it, training aids, right? I use a number of different training aids. The Mantis is another training aid. Again, and I want to say that I don't use it all the time. It gamifies, right?
Yes.
The dry fire practice, the dry fire routine. Sometimes if I feel like if I get to I want to call it a rut where I feel like I'm starting to dread, doing the dry fire, right? Because let's face it, it is work. It's something that you need to focus on doing. I will use that tool to gamify it a little bit. So now I have a specific goal in the app that I can work towards or I can achieve, and I can compete more or less with my other friends and things like that are in the group. The Cool Fire is another fantastic training aid. Yeah. as far as simulating recoil, we'll call it, it still only gives you a certain amount of shots. It only works for certain platforms. It's kind of expensive. It's a neat. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, right?
Sure.
It's an extra little thing that's out there, widget that's out there. The laser attachment that's for it, it's hit or miss, right? So I mean, there's some drawbacks to it, but the benefit is you can get a simulation of what felt recoil is in a safe environment, right? So that's one of the benefits to that.
SIRT pistol. The SIRT pistol is another great one. Working on, but dry fire, when we were talking about just working on your trigger press and seeing whether or not your trigger influences your sights.
Yep.
And the SIRT pistol is a great one for that.
Yeah.
I used it very heavily when I was training in GSSF because the plate rack was like my nemesis.
Right.
And so I put a little plate rack up in my dry fire area, and that's what I use. That and the laser software, LASR software. That's stuff, that combination worked really, really well. But it can be a game, as you were saying a while ago, right? And if that's what you need, man, that's what you need. Whatever gets you out there and whatever gets you practicing. But,
my absolute favorite dry fire tool, right? And I say this in many classes, I say this in front of many people, is the good old-fashioned click pen, right?
Oh, yeah.
Good old-fashioned little clicky pen. So the people, if you're watching us on the YouTubes, you can see me right now. But having a proper trigger press is extremely important. So being able to bend your finger in the right place, keeping everything nice and straight and and mechanical, right? Really is what helps gain speed. That really helps keep that efficiency of movement, efficiency of motion, and then eventually you can start doing things quicker and quicker. So the click pen is something that you can do literally anywhere, right?
Right. Unless you're around me, because it's really annoying.
Yeah, right. My coworkers constantly send me the HR. Frank's clicking that dang pen again. Yeah, but the again that click pen is having it in your hand and working that proper trigger press even without an actual firearm in your hand. There's something to that.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, there's something to
you get
that.
a lot of reps like that.
You get a ton of reps like that, and it's something you can do in an office, in a car, whatever it may be. And it's nobody knows what you're doing unless you open your mouth and say something, And there's little things that you can do that really help aid in this evolution of being a responsibly armed citizen. Going along with that, right? We've talked heavily about firearms. What about those other skills, those other essential skills that you can use, and we'll call it dry fire, right? Get a buddy, right? Yeah. Get a friend. Work on those hand-to-hand skills. Work on those little, just working on balance, right? Pushing on each other, moving each other, not actually hurting each other, right? That's not the focus. But getting into a place where you can work on some of those skills to where if you got in some sort of entanglement, you at least have some exterior force that's coming against you that can help with that.
Working on the clinch, working on getting out of the clinch, and that type of thing. Yeah. Before we go too deep into that, I want to make sure that we identify with some of our listeners out there who may not own a firearm or are interested in this subject, but they haven't got into it yet. There are a lot of tools. You can just go on Amazon and find it. If you got a general idea what kind of handgun you want to buy, but you don't own one, there's pretty much an airsoft gun replica
100%.
Of that.
Yep.
For every handgun that exists, just about every modern handgun. So I mean, you can get your hands on a replica of a Gen 5 Glock, 19 or even a 17 or whatever.
Or you can SIG or whatever it is.
You can get your hands on an airsoft version of that. And that is an excellent, excellent training tool for a fraction of the cost of what you're going to spend on a real gun. Yep. So if you're just trying to get the reps in, that might be it. The other thing is, and this goes along with anything else that we're going to continue to talk about as far as dry fire training goes, if you don't have any formal education in the subject that you're trying to practice, go get that first.
100%.
Right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not saying I'd love to see you out at Apache. I'd love to come, sign up for a private session. That's the way what those are designed for. Come out, take a private session, say, oh, this is what I need to work on. and then they're going to send you home with some homework on this is how you work on it safely in an environment in a controlled environment in your home.
Yep.
You go home and you practice that for a little while.
Yep.
That will at least set you in the right direction on how to effectively dry fire, because man, you can sit back and just try to be John Wayne or John Wick in your basement all day long, and you're really there's a high likelihood you're just going to create a bunch of bad habits.
Right.
We see it all the time. But if you can't get to us for a private session, find a class online. I mean, there's all kinds of different online classes. There's different YouTube videos. There's different Facebook groups. Deliberate Training Group is one of them, where I see a lot of people talk about, hey, this is my video of me dry firing. Tell me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. And there's a ton of people in there that are just excellent at giving feedback.
And that's the key, right? Getting eyes on you. It's very easy to go through and do your own thing, but if you don't have an outside party looking at you and helping critique you constructively, then you're not really going to have much growth.
Absolutely.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back, continuing our conversation on dry fire.
Welcome back to the RAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we talk about everything revolving the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly, and with me I have Frank Horvath.
Hey.
We have been talking about dry fire, and the last segment, man, we were really digging into it, and I think we were really gaining some ground with it. So we've been talking about all kinds of stuff, and the last thing we were talking about was just some of the different tools that can kind of help assist you along the way that doesn't involve a real firearm, right? So whether that means going out and getting a replica airsoft gun and practicing with it, or even if you wanted to buy a blue gun. A blue gun is just a plastic shape of a firearm, essentially, that fits into holsters and stuff. Those are also really good tools. One of the ways we use that for dry fire in private sessions, I've been known to send students home with a blue gun. Just, hey, take this home. Your homework is walking around your house doing different tasks throughout your entire, like your regular routine around the house. Mm-hmm. Be it, going to get something out of the kitchen, or, going to feed the animals, or whatever it is that you're doing. And try not to flag yourself or your animals, or pick a couple of pieces of furniture that mean something to you, and try not to flag them. And learn how to keep your finger straight and off of the trigger while you're directing your muzzle. And I'm telling you, man, with the students that did that, by the time they come back to their next private session, they are light years more in control of their handgun than they were, and all they did was just walk around with it in their hand. Right. They didn't do anything special.
Yeah, the crazy part, especially when you're in the private training circuit, right? As we are, the students who advanced the most, the quickest, were the ones who took dry fire seriously, right? 90% of the work, right? 90% of what you're doing, it's all done in dry fire, and that 10% is the verification of what you've done in dry fire.
Right.
There's a little bit. I mean, I'm talking about a little bit that comes with the actual recoil and piece like that, right? Like managing that recoil. But for the most part, those fundamentals are all solidified in dry fire. Right. Effectively solidified in dry fire. So, there's so much work. There's so much good things that come from dry fire. It's really hard to escape it. Right. Not if you're taking it seriously, right? If you're really wanting to focus on saying, hey, I'm a responsibly armed citizen. This is something that I need to do. This is something that I'm going to focus on. Dry fire is that excellent way of really ensuring that you're doing things correctly, and it's an excellent way of gaining skill, making sure that everything is locked in, and then a way of verifying, like I said, those other things, right? Those things that we don't naturally think about, like we spent almost the entire segment, one of our segments, safety, right?
Yeah.
And the safety of the skill set. But you're absolutely correct. It's being able to navigate around a home. Even with, like I said, that blue gun or that orange gun or whatever it may be. that is a huge tool, huge benefit. Again, and it's reasonably cheap. You're talking like $20,
Right.
on Amazon or whatever maybe. I mean, they're not expensive at all.
Right.
And there are a ton of other uses for those. I mean, we've talked about in other segments, but we won't go down there. So, Tim, this is our last segment. We are into our competency of the month. So, what is our competency of the month of February?
All right, competency of the month. We're going to be talking about, surprise, surprise, describe the benefits of dry fire and discuss the drawbacks of dry fire training. So that should be fun.
We have been hammering on the benefits of dry fire.
Yeah.
I mean, we've absolutely talked about all kinds of different things. We've talked about the what you really gain from that. I really want to hone in on the drawbacks, right?
Yeah.
So because there are some few, and I think they're holes for the new the new beginner, the new person who's really getting into it. The dry fire, we've been toting this entire time, like the benefits. Hey, this is what you should do. You should absolutely dry fire. The piece that a lot of people, neglect or don't think about is, I'm dry firing, I'm doing this, but they're doing it wrong.
Right.
And that is a significant drawback.
Yeah. So that is the drawback to a, let's say, non-audited dry fire session, right? So you're just doing it alone at your house. You haven't videoed yourself. You haven't, and that's all you do. That's all you ever do. One of the best ways you can get around that is if you're going to dry fire at home is everybody's got a video camera on their phone these days, right? Just take some video of yourself. If you're on Facebook, you can get into Deliberate Training Group is probably one of my favorites. It's just a Facebook group, and it's full of excellent individuals in there that are dying to give you feedback. Right. Myself, Dan Brady is in there. Memphis Beach is in there. There's a ton of other, Christopher Bean's in there. Adam Winch is in there. There's a ton of like excellent firearms trainers that are just like, yeah, sure, I'll watch your 2 or 3 minute clip and listen to you or watch you, dry fire for a minute and give you some feedback on what I think you could do better.
Yeah.
And that's how you get better. You don't only get better through repetition. You get better through, through guidance.
Right.
If somebody, that triples your learning curve. Or triples your the learning process, right?
It cuts down on how quickly you're retaining that, or
exactly
you're exercising that.
So I think if it's only really a drawback is if you're doing it alone all the time and you have had no guidance whatsoever. And I'm nobody special. I send my videos to all kinds of people.
Yep.
Like, hey, can you see anything here? Because, even when I watch the video, I'm having a hard time critiquing myself, but I know I can get this, what I'm shooting for, no pun intended. I know I can achieve this goal. Mm-hmm. What am I doing wrong? And get some helpful feedback from them, and then apply it. And then, look at that! I achieved what I was going for. So non-audited dry fire training can be a serious drawback.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other drawback that I would say, or another thing that sticks in my mind is, we briefly discussed the gamifying thing is really taking that too far, right? Letting that be the focus of your dry fire session. I had earlier discussed that, at times if I feel like I'm getting stuck in a rut or something like that, then I will use that to help, kind of gamify it, right? But that is a temporary, fix, if you'll call it, to just, getting out of my own head. It's not something that I'm constantly using to constantly try and compete, constantly do, the Mantis X. Mantis X is a fantastic platform, right, for, analyzing draw fire strokes and stuff like that. But you can cheat. Yeah. And that's the problem. if you're being pushed up against another person, right, another peer, or you're trying to do a particular time or something like that, then there are all sorts of different things that you can do to make it look like you're doing something, but you're not recording yourself. It's a game, right?
Right.
And that's a problem if you're a person who doesn't have good integrity with your buddies, as far as something like that, a game,
Right.
then you can absolutely cheat, and all you're doing is you're cheating yourself.
Absolutely.
You're robbing yourself of the ability to get good reps in. You're robbing yourself of the ability for to really use the tool as it was intended to be used.
Right.
You're chasing after the wrong thing, unless all you want to do is play the game. If you want to play the game, play the game. But for using it as a dry fire tool, that is definitely a potential drawback. Is going into kind of with the wrong mindset or for the wrong reasons.
I think and when it comes to dry fire, a lot of people's hesitation on it is, man, I've got other stuff I need to be doing around the house. So it's kind of like going to the gym, right? It's where a lot of people don't succeed in sticking to the gym in their own home, because they get distracted real easily, saying, but I really could go do this, right? So there's some drawbacks there, all right? So having a place where you can go and dry fire and can separate yourself from things for a little bit is really important. I have that problem in my own place because I have kids running around throughout the house.
100%.
So if I don't turn on some music or do something to really just try to get me in the zone, it's really difficult for me to focus and dry fire.
That's one of the challenges in my home is, we've I have my fireplace, right? That is my dry fire arena. I think we've talked about it in the past, but that I really love using my fireplace. Unconveniently, it's literally in the middle of my living room. Right. So like I said earlier, early in the morning before the kids are up, late in the afternoon when it's just my wife and I, whatever it may be, that is when I can chunk these in. That's when I can really work on that. And that right there, being able to remove those distractions, not have the kids around, not have the wife is over there reading her book or doing her own thing, right? Then you can really hone in and you can focus and you can really pay attention to that. Because again, remember, a lot of you will be dry firing with the actual firearm that you use for self-defense, right? So one of the very first things that you're going to be doing is administratively handling that firearm, unloading it from a loaded condition, or loading it from an unloaded condition. So practicing those safety skills and really going through the focus on that. So go ahead.
The last thing I would say about the drawbacks of dry firing would be dry fire does not replace live fire.
Right.
As great as it is, and as much time as you can spend, as beneficial as it is, it does not replace live fire training. So speaking of that, let's talk about some of the upcoming classes we have coming to Apache. We have all kinds of great stuff. We've got, obviously, our private sessions are 7 days a week. You can book a private session directly from our website at ApacheNC.com. If you add a / and events to the end of that, it'll take you to our calendar. Our course calendar is going to show you all of our next classes that we have coming up. We have everything from our basic Apache Pistol 101, which is a deep dive into the modern handgun. Excellent class. We have your standard North Carolina concealed carry handgun classes. Matter of fact, we have one of those coming up
in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, pretty soon. So you can find that again at ApacheNC.com / events. We also have a special guest coming in a few weeks. We have John Willis of Gunsets going to be here to teach his real-world trauma class. Don't miss that. Don't miss that. It's going to be an excellent class.
That is a fantastic class. Absolutely fantastic. I had the opportunity to take in that class not long ago, and just a wealth of information was just absolutely mind-blowing. He's such an incredible instructor. Tim, thank you for the conversation today. Really
Likewise.
Enjoyed it. Talking about all things dry fire. You're listening to the Responsible Armed Citizen Show. We'll see you guys next week.